Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I think we give it
We're going to win tonight.
Hoping. Always hoping.
It's not a matter of hope. We're going to win tonight.
Both last year, 2017, and this year, 2018, we're observing the 100th anniversary of our country's involvement in the conflict we now call the First World War, better known, at least at the time, as the War to End All Wars, which it unfortunately was not. We'll play perhaps the most famous popular song to come out of that conflict, the marching song Over There by George M. Cohan, declaring that we won't come home until it's over, over there.
Yes, we are. I know so. I know so. I know so.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats or find your location. We're just about ready to start our 24th Memorial Day ceremony.
Got everything you need now, buddy?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here at the 24th Memorial Day ceremony in Falls Church City. I'm Harry Shovlin, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for today's program. Please stand for the posting of the colors, posting of the POW-MIA flag, the national anthem, and the invocation. Color guard, post, colors.
Gary Colors. Outstep Martin.
Bob Smith, post POW-MIA flag.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous night o'er the ramparts we watched was so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Now the invocation.
Let us bow our heads to pray. Lord God, we gather this morning to honor the memories of those who died in the service of our country. We now enjoy the freedoms of a democratic country because of the sacrifices they and their families have made. Lord God, we give you thanks today for their defense of our country and for their service to us. Thank you for the great benefits that we continue to receive because of their service and sacrifice. Remind us today of our obligation and duty to honor their sacrifices and to uphold and defend the values they fought and died for. May we appreciate and treasure the freedoms of our democracy that were bought and preserved at such a great cost, and uphold, defend, and strengthen the liberty we now enjoy because of their service. We thank you that they serve the cause of justice, freedom, and liberty for all, faithfully, sacrificially, and courageously. Thank you for this day and time to recall their sacrifices and honor them. May we always be thankful and grateful for their service. Amen.
You may be seated. It's at this time that I have the honor of introducing the mayor of the City of Falls Church. David Tarter has been mayor for at least 2 terms, or is in his 2nd term as mayor. He has led us through a time when a lot of things are going on. So he has not been bored during his tour as mayor. At this time, David Tarter, come forward.
Thank you, Harry. I've not been bored and hopefully not boring either. But anyway, welcome to the 2018 Falls Church Memorial Day celebration. I'm delighted to be part of this special day. I hope you all enjoyed this morning's fun run. I see a bunch of t-shirts there. Looks like a lot of folks have participated. Although the results are not yet official, I believe I set a course record in this morning's race. That's right, slowest time ever. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize some of my colleagues from government. We're honored to have State Senator Dick Saslaw. Raise your hand there, Dick. Big round of applause. Vice Mayor Mary Beth Connolly. Where is Mary Beth? There she is. Phil Duncan. There he is. Dave Snyder. Where are you, Dave? There he is in the back. Ross Lichtenhouse. And Dan Z from City Council. So we have almost our entire City Council out here to honor folks today. Commissioner of Revenue, Tom Clinton. Where is Tom? There he is. Our Planning Commission, Lindy Hockenberry. Somewhere. There she is. From the EDA, Eric Pelton. Where's Eric? In the back there. Wyatt Shields, our city manager. And Cindy Messner, our assistant city manager. So I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. I probably have, but we've got a lot of great folks here in attendance today. But this ceremony gives us the opportunity to remember what Memorial Day is all about. While it's a day full of entertainment, picnics, barbecues, and other festivities, it's first and foremost our time to come together as a community to honor all of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, airwomen, Marines, members of the Merchant Marines and Coast Guard who have given their lives for us. We're all gathered at the Falls Church Veterans Memorial today to remember those who have fought and those who gave their lives in defense of our country and the freedoms we enjoy. Everything we do today, the fun run, the parade, this ceremony, is done in the memory and in the honor of our fallen heroes and the ideals they fought for. President Kennedy said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Let us then be inspired by their sacrifice and live our lives with courage, compassion, and integrity. Let us remember William Ward's treatment that greatness is not found in possessions, power, position, or prestige. It is discovered in goodness, humility, service, and character. Each Memorial Day, I'm drawn back to Lincoln, perhaps because Lincoln carried the weight of the catastrophic losses of the era and gave us words to express how we grieve for the heavy sacrifice and loss of war. how we honor the courage of our fighting men and women, and how we celebrate the freedoms they won for all of us. I will leave you with words from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, from a ceremony that was a forerunner of today's Memorial Day. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge some of the many people who made this celebration possible. Thank you to the Greater Falls Church Veterans Council and the local American Legion Post and Veterans of Foreign Wars for organizing this ceremony. There we go, yes, absolutely. The Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR, for the lovely flowers. The Falls Church Concert Band, absolutely fantastic, led by Robert Little. Wonderful, wonderful music. Thank you all. Sergeant Major Robert Patillo for that beautiful singing voice and your great music today. Master Gunnery Sergeant Robert Abracimento. All right, there we go. I got pretty close this time, I think. But anyway, where are you? He's fantastic, absolutely wonderful, who's going to be doing tap. Retired Colonel Ward Nickish, our keynote speaker, who has served our nation in Vietnam and in many posts of distinction. Reverend Rick Wright of the Falls Church Anglican, thank you for that moving invocation. Chris Madison, Danny Schlitt, and the rest of the Parks and Rec Department. Hopefully all around here close by, but thank you. Our Master of Ceremonies, Harry Shovlin, who has organized this special event every year since 1994. All right, let's have a big round for Harry. And finally, thank you all for joining us here in Falls Church. May God bless America. Enjoy this wonderful celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter. At this time, I want to introduce Bob Smith, who's chairman of the Greater Falls Church Area Veterans Council. Bob?
Soldiers never die until they're no longer remembered. So I thank you for coming out today to continue to live the lives and appreciate the things that we all live today because of those soldiers. Thank you, and I hope to always see you at all these events. We also worry about our democracy. Communism destroyed a democracy. So I wear this in tribute to that democracy that we want to have back when communism is no longer a threat to the world. Unfortunately, we still fight that problem. Thank you.
Now we're going to have the presentation of a song, and it's being played by our Falls Church Orchestra.
Inscribed on the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery are the following words. Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God. This piece by James Ployhar is a musical tribute to all servicemen and especially those who died in battle and will forever remain unknown. You will hear fragments of some of the many melodies associated with our soldiers. You will also hear the poem In Flanders Fields, perhaps the most famous literary work to come out of the First World War, The Unknown Soldier. In Flanders fields the poppies grow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw a sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields.
Thank you very much. Such a well-known number, and we're so lucky to have a band of professional quality, and it's a professional quality because there are professionals who actually play in it, besides volunteers. But obviously, it adds a great deal to our ceremony here. Give them another hand. It's my pleasure to introduce our main speaker today, Colonel Ward Nicklish. He was born in Huron, South Dakota, retired after 30 years in the Army service, including duty in Vietnam. He later commanded 2 companies in Germany and a battalion of the 18th Air Corps at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Went on to serve as the Deputy Adjutant General of the Army and Director of Casualty and Memorial Affairs. In that position, he was responsible for the search, recovery, identification, and repatriation of the soldiers of all military services whose bodies were never recovered from all prior wars. That mission is now under the direction of the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. I could read for another 20 minutes, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let him tell you about himself. Please, warm welcome for Colonel Ward Nicklish.
Thank you, Harry, for those kind remarks. I told Harry to keep it short. Just get up there and tell the people this is Mother Nickish's little boy who tried. But Mayor Tarter, Senator Saslaw, and other distinguished guests, the members of our fallen, the families of our fallen warriors, a special greeting to you here today. When I retired from the Army, my wife said, "Sweetheart, I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch. You're out of here." So it was her way of telling me I needed to maybe do something else, you know, and occupy my time. And that brings me to a story that is told about this Navy veteran who had applied for a greeting job at one of the retail outlets. And they hired him immediately because of his strong resume. But he was having trouble coming to work on time. And it went on for a couple of weeks, and finally the store manager said, "Sir, you have got a distinguished military record, but you've been coming to work, you know, unreliably. We never know when you're going to show up. What did they say to you in the military when you wouldn't show up on time?" And he said, "Well, they all stood up and said, 'Good morning, Admiral. Are you ready for your coffee?'" It's a special privilege for me to be here today on this special Memorial Day as we pause and honor and remember those Americans, men and women of our armed forces who throughout history have sacrificed their lives that we might live in peace and enjoy our freedoms. I'm sure you took note of the flag flying over this monument here today. The symbolism should not be lost on us. That flag flies today because of those who sacrificed yesterday. And I'm pleased to see so many of you here today because you are a testament to the fact that you recognize that there is Memorial Day is not just another day off, and that there's more to it than a day at the beach. We've come here on this day to honor and remember those brave patriots who stood in the breach when the defense of liberty demanded the ultimate sacrifice. Those great soldier servants who gave their lives seeking greatness for their country, not for themselves. The concept of a day to honor those killed in the war arose out of the ashes of the Civil War. It was originally known as Decoration Day, when families from both North and South placed flowers on the graves of their loved ones. Why should we have special days with events and ceremonies like the one we share today? Simply stated, we have them to honor and remember those who died to defend our liberties and freedoms. They fought not for personal gain, but for personal liberty, and not for the glory of war, but for the prize of peace. Events such as this goes back to biblical times. In Joshua chapter 4, after crossing the Jordan River, Joshua directed the tribal elders to take some stones and build a monument. Tribal elders asked Joshua, "Why is it that we're building this monument out of stones?" And Joshua answered them saying that we do this so that when your children ask, "What do these stones mean?" you can tell them of the history of our people and the sovereignty of God. So in similar fashion, the white crosses and gray headstones in our cemeteries, the monuments in town squares, and even the faded pictures in the family photo albums, these are the stones of today. But why do we have them? Come with me to Lexington and Concord and the shot heard round the world. And there you will find a statue of a colonial patriot with one hand on the plow and the other on his musket standing at the ready. And therein are inscribed the words of Captain Parker, who said, "Stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." And so when our children ask, "What do these stones mean?" We can tell them of the American spirit of determination to secure and defend liberty. Next, join me on a short trip up to the Battle of Antietam, some 75 miles northwest of here. It was the site of the bloodiest date in military history, with some 23,000 killed, wounded, and missing. In the center of the battlefield is a cemetery, and in that cemetery stands a lone Confederate Civil War soldier. It's on the base are inscribed the words, "Not for themselves, but for their country." And so when our children ask, what do these stones mean, we can tell them of the spirit of American spirit of selfless service to nation and fellow citizens. You've no doubt visited the National D-Day Memorial down in Bedford, Virginia. If you haven't, I strongly encourage you to do so. You've undoubtedly been down to the World War II Memorial and the Korean Memorial and the black granite walls of the Vietnam Wall in downtown D.C. When our children ask about those stones, the statues, and all the names on the black granite panels, what do they mean? We can tell them of the American spirit of courage and sacrifice in 3 very different wars and conflicts. And this morning we stand here in front of this magnificent memorial here in Falls Church, which honors our warriors, with each pillar bearing the emblem of each of our uniformed services. So when our children ask, what do these stones mean, we can tell them of the devastation of war, the sacrifices of those who served, and the price paid to secure the way of life that we enjoy. And while these stones speak of the tragedy of war and the loss of life, they also speak to the brotherhood of the warrior and the pride that is earned in honorable service. This is also an appropriate time and place for us to single out, with profound respect and solemn tribute, those who died and did not return from all of our prior wars and conflicts, affectionately known as our POWs and MIAs. I was honored to speak to the Falls Church Military History Forum here in the Community Center last Friday, and we talked about the efforts to recover our POWs and MIAs. As Harry mentioned, prior to my retirement, I served as Deputy Adjutant General of the Army and also as Director of Casualty and Memorial Affairs. And in that position, I supervised the unit that was responsible for the search, recovery, and identification and return of our fallen and unaccounted to their families. Today, that mission, as Harry mentioned, is now underneath the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, or DPAA. In that regard, we still have 1,598 unaccounted for and who have yet to return home from Southeast Asia. That's all 3 countries, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. More than 7,700 from Korea, and almost 73,000 from World War II remain unaccounted for. Of those numbers, there are 45 Virginians still missing from Southeast Asia, including 2 whose home of record is shown as being here in Falls Church, Virginia. 193 remain unaccounted for Virginians remain unaccounted for from Korea, and 1,109 from World War II. The agency has been in some 46 countries over the years. It has teams deployed around the world throughout the year who search for, recover, identify, and return the remains or missing and unaccounted for to their families. Just this month, the agency announced that in the month of May, they've identified 2 soldiers from World War II and 3 from Korea, bringing the total accounted for in the first 5 months of this year to 46 from World War II, 14 from Korea, and 3 from Southeast Asia. It is the mission of the DPAA that forms another one of those living stones or living monuments in our nation's history. So that when our children ask, what does the work of the DPAA stone mean, we can tell them of the 4th pillar of the soldier's ethos, which says that I will never leave a fallen comrade. And that's true off the battlefields of today or those from decades gone by. And we can tell them of the work being done by DPAA to fulfill the America's promise to achieve the fullest possible accounting of those who remain missing. There's a folklore account of a mythical Nordic battle back in the 10th century, which involved a small band of 13 warriors who were facing a large Viking horde of overwhelming numbers. As the battle was about to ensue, at that moment when the warrior knows the imminent onslaught of war and likely death, one member of that small band of warriors recited a prayer saying, "Merciful Father, I have spent my days with plans of many things. This was not among them. But at this moment, I beg only to live the next few minutes well." I don't know if those we honor and remember on this day had similar thoughts or offered up such a prayer as they entered into their last battle. But I do know that each of them, in their own way, lived their last few minutes well. We must always recognize that, pay tribute to them, and never forget their sacrifice. Here in Washington, especially inside the Beltway, there's a lot of talk about the national debt. I often think that the true national debt that we owe lies beneath the headstones in Arlington National Cemetery. So let me leave you with this thought. There's a profound statement that adorns one of the large monuments in Arlington National Cemetery. It speaks volumes about the bravery and valor of the men and women who risked their lives. It reads, "Not for fame or reward, not for place or rank, not lured by ambition or goaded by necessity, but in simple obedience to duty as they understood it, these men suffered all, sacrificed all, dared all, and died." So here this day we remain ever mindful of those brave men and women who, from Valley Forge to the current conflicts in the sands of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan, who answered the clarion call and donned the cloth of our nation to serve their country. And we remember the more than 1.3 million who have died doing so. It's been my pleasure to be here with you today. I especially appreciate the courtesies extended by the City of Falls Church, and I pray that God will be pleased to grant His blessings on the legacies of our fallen warriors and their families and on this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Your experience couldn't have been any more appropriate for today and as our main speaker. And I personally have to thank Mr. Steve White. Please stand up, Steve. He's responsible for getting Colonel Nicklish to be here and to be our speaker. Okay, now we're going to have an interlude with the orchestra, and Bob Botello is going to sing God Bless America.
While the storm clouds gather with a light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Bob. I wish I could say I took full credit for his voice, but just being his neighbor isn't enough, okay? Okay, at this time, for 24 years, the Daughters of the American Revolution have presented the wreath at our Memorial Day ceremony, as well as Veterans Day. It's an organization that has been with us in the City of Falls Church in our efforts to build this memorial for 8 years, now for 24, so that means they've been with us for 32 years. So, we're now going to have the presentation of the wreath and have Shannon Combs Bennett from the Falls Church Chapter, National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, escorted by Howard Chatham. He's a member of the U.S. Submarine Veterans Association, and Richard Anton, who is a member of American Legion Post 130. Please come forward. Please stand. You may be seated. At this time, before we have the prayer for departed veterans, I always like to bring to everyone's attention some individuals who are not with us today, but who are directly responsible for the memorial and as well as the ceremonies, the early ceremonies. Some of the members of the committee who were with us from the beginning to the end in the process of building this memorial were Tony Skirbo, Janine Smale, Paul Smale, Jerry Miller, Ed Strait. Vipa saw fit to put a plaque right here in Memorial Garden with Ed's name on it for his contributions to VIPAS. Ed was involved in all facets of life in Falls Church. And two individuals who are still alive, the remaining members of the original committee, were Liam O'Clism and me. So there are only two of us left, okay? I would like to also make mention of an individual in the audience who for many, many years has been responsible for keeping the women, we're not going to say women's auxiliary or ladies, okay? It's the auxiliary, otherwise I'm going to catch something from the ladies. So it's the American Legion Auxiliary, And with us today happens to be Chris Madison's grandmother, who has been actively involved in the Women's Auxiliary at the local and state and probably national level. So Pearl Klingbeil is with us. Please give her a hand right here. She was also a counselor at the Virginia State Girls State Program, which has been at Longwood College for many, many years, and basically gave 6, 7, 8 days of her summer up every year for that program. Also, another aspect that I guess I take poetic license in stretching the ceremony a little bit. I mentioned individuals who have contributed to city life even though they weren't in uniform when they did that. And that was, we had a few people pass, Maynard Loy being one. He's a former commander of the American Legion Post 130. We had Margaret Peg Dolan, who was career military wife, mother of 6 children, 5 George Mason graduates. I'm sure that 5 of those 6 were graduates of George Mason. But typical of citizens in the Falls Church, she was a volunteer at Hope for over 20 years. She left us this spring. Charles Chuck Weir. He was a school board member, father of 4 George Mason graduates. He was a Marine officer. Michael Flaherty, George Mason graduate, gone well before his time. Carol Shreve, a 70s graduate of George Mason. Rick Thurman. We wouldn't have the plaques that are hanging on the community center if it weren't for Rick Thurman. He was a retired USGS career employee. He was active member of the Historical Commission, who performed the majority of the research for our plaques, listing all Falls Church area military personnel who died while serving their country. The number of hours he spent in researching every one of those names, checking addresses to make sure that they actually were in the greater Falls Church area. And sometimes people forget, Bailey's Crossroads is Falls Church, Skyline, Falls Church area, parts of Tyson's Falls Church area. So it's a huge area, but he was up for the task, and he did the work. We're going to miss all of those individuals. Okay, now, those plaques. I think it's worth our time at every ceremony where we read the names of the individuals who have found their names on the tax because they died in uniform. Starting with the Mexican War, 1846 to 1848, Henry Fairfax. Civil War, Charles Henry Ashford, William Joseph Rowan Burge, Frank Brooks, Daniel French Delaney, Walter Kirby, William Kirby, Charles Newton, John Reed, James Roby, John Sewell, John Tourette. World War I, Stephen McGroarty, Warner McIntosh, Arthur Morgan, Ralph Stembaugh, Walter Trevender. World War II, Corbin Barton, Brian III, Daniel Budd, Willis Chin, Thomas Cunningham, William Fott, Roy Gilbert, Warner Hawley, John Costas, Norman Leopard, John Madden, Lyndon Marshall, Paul Martin, Raymond Martin, Reuben Moffett, Joseph Patterson, Philip Pergonde, Paul Rohrer, William Shears, Ralph Smith, Linwood Spencer, Benjamin Stalcup, James Taylor, Victor Tureau, Edwin Ward, James Whitmer. Korean War, John Julian. Vietnam War, Sandro Barone, Ernest Beauchamp, Charles Bonnet, Victor Buckley, Peter Donnell, Walter Eads, George Hans, Lyle King, Arden Lieberger, Neil Monet, William Nanau, Darnell Payne, George Perry, Thomas Reagan, Jeffrey Reich, Bruce Robinson, David Francis Strickler, whose brother is a member of our color guard, John Stoller, William Sutton, Ronald Toward, Darrell Umholtz, Richard Weiss. Afghanistan, Harold J. Green, Stephen L. Mace, Ronald A. Rodriguez. That was from October 2001 to December 2014. Iraq, March 2003, December 2011. Andy Anderson, Tenzin Denklim, Javier Oblayes, Parado Pena. And last but not least, Jonathan D. Winterbottom. Just take a minute of meditation before we have the prayer for the departed soldier. Thank you. Reverend Wright.
Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, thank you for this time we have had this morning to remember, honor, and reflect upon the sacrifice of military veterans who died in service to our country. Lord, we thank you for those from Falls Church that have served and died in our armed forces. We thank you for others we each remember, especially family members or friends, and for all who died in service to this country. May they all rest in peace. Heavenly Father, you are the God of all comfort. We ask that you would comfort those who mourn and grieve the loss of those who have recently died in military service. May their family members, comrades, and friends find comfort in you and through others who reach out with love and support them. We also pray for those who are currently serving in the armed forces. Protect them from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Support their families while they are serving abroad and bring their loved ones home safely. May our country support our veterans well, both during and after their service to us. O God, give wisdom to our military leaders, that they may serve with diligence and ability, thwarting all the plans of our enemies, providing safety and security at home, and promoting peace and stability throughout the world. O God, you are the giver of all good gifts. Thank you for all the military veterans who have died in service to our country, those known and those unknown. Now, O Lord, may you bless us and keep us. Make your face to shine upon us and be gracious to us. Lift up your countenance upon us and grant us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please remain standing. Color guard, retire colors. Retire POW MIA flag. Okay, you may be seated. On Friday, I was invited to attend graduation at the Naval Academy, and so Falls Church was represented in the class of 2018. And the individual who received his diploma was a member of Scout Troop 349, which is sponsored by American Legion Post 130. We're the charter organization. 9 years. It's not an old troop, it's 9 years old. But he was the first Eagle Scout to be admitted to an academy and to graduate from an academy. So as President Trump handed him his diploma, Falls Church was well represented. And I must say, for a president to hang out for 2.5 or 3 hours and he personally handed out 1,190 diplomas, that was quite a feat for any human being. Okay. Also, there's one thing I want to share with you. You know, there's history and then there's history. There's oral history, there's written history, and so forth. But I'm going to share just one thing with you, and the reason why it's on my mind is because one of our Falls Church businesses donated a sculpture of George Patton to American Legion Post 130. And so here's this big sculpture that we have on display. And I know a story about George Patton that isn't written anywhere. And believe me, it's confirmed. During World War II, 1942, George Patton was fighting the Desert Fox in Africa. And, you know, two characters, by the way, okay? Patton as well as Rommel. And a lot of people know that General Patton was a horseman. He was an equestrian. He was particularly fond of steeplechase races. So there was a horse trainer by the name of, don't laugh, Norman Haymaker, and he was friends with George before World War II. And so it was, I don't know, October, September. The phone rings in Norman Haymaker's house at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he got out of bed, and, you know, who's calling him at such an hour? Picks it up, says, Norman! He said, who won the Gold Cup? And Norman says, I'm not going to use his language, who are you? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And he goes, it's George, it's George. He says, George who? He says, how many Georges do you know? He said, well, about 10. He says, well, I'm the only general you know. It was George Patton calling this horse trainer at 3 o'clock in the morning to find out who won the Gold Cup. Now, remember, we didn't have any satellites back then, so it had to be by shortwave radio, beaming from North Africa to somewhere in and around White Post, Virginia. But another story, George Patton, and it isn't written. Now, we just extended that history. Remember, I'm a retired educator. I am done. Thank you for being here. We'll see you on Veterans Day.
You too.